Hironobu Sakaguchi, I want to say it was 2020 or maybe 2019, sometime fairly recently, was doing a live stream. He got to this point and he couldn't figure out how to do the blitz, and he actually got a game over. He couldn't figure it out. His own game. And everybody... What's up? Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name is Kason.
This is our Final Fantasy VI analysis series. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
we were supposed to get to the Returner's Hideout last time. We didn't get even close to that point.
Not even close. I think we will get there and beyond.
I believe we will today, yeah.
So the goal here is to play up to the Phantom Train.
Phantom Train.
We'll see if that happens.
That's as far as I played. That's as far as you played.
That's far.
We'll see if we talk all the way through that section. But
if not, we'll update you at the end.
Yes, about where hopefully to play up to next time. But I think we will. We left
for the episode previous. Huh?
We left off at Figaro Castle. Well, I think we had just gone through the flashback with Sabin, where you name Sabin and Edgar was talking about their dad being sick and all that. So we hadn't. I think we had just gotten up to the part where Kefka is supposed to come in now. We would have had an introduction, well, not really introduction, but like a short flashback with Kefka before this, where
brief with Terra,
where she fell and she sort of remembered him putting the slave crown on and laughing maniacally as she was destroying all those Magitech dudes. The event that everyone's referencing, the 50 soldiers in 3 minutes thing.
Yeah.
He was the one who sort of spurred that event, and so we saw that. But this is sort of a more proper kind of first introduction to the character here. I'm trying to think about... I'm trying to be careful again about what to say, because I don't want to spoil anything or even lead into too much about what would be spoilers for later on. But I really like the way that they... I'll leave it at this. I really like the way that they present this character in the sections that we're playing here.
Yeah.
In particular, when you get to Doma, right?
Oh,
and he poisons the water, and of course we'll get all to this in a minute. But then you actually fight him during that section.
Yeah.
And it's almost like kind of a one hit. And he just runs away.
And he runs away. Wait.
Yeah, he's not particularly strong.
Yeah.
And in the SNES version of the script, which is the version we're playing, though I'm referencing the GBA version of the script for what we pull for dialogue here, they refer to him as a court mage only in the advanced script. So that's the only part where I pulled, he must know some magic then with whatever experiments they're doing there. In the Empire, what little we know about that so far, right? But he's not a particularly strong enemy in battle. He's actually pretty weak. And I think that the way that they introduce him here, right? And sort of the way that this plays out kind of throughout the early sections. Again, I don't want to say anything too much, but I think it leads really well into what's coming later.
Okay, nice.
I think that they do a really good job of presenting you with a character that it's kind of like Gilgamesh a little bit in Final Fantasy V.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh.
No, not the real Gilgamesh.
I was like, no, he's got this progression too. That would be more like Enkidu, but
Yeah. So for anyone who played Final Fantasy V, Gilgamesh was kind of almost like a joke boss whenever you fought him. He was a recurring boss fight that you would fight, and he was just kind of funny.
Yeah.
And you didn't take him very seriously because he just beat him up every time you fight him. So it's almost like they're introducing us to Kefka in a similar way. It's almost like he's being used for a similar archetype or trope in this game too.
Okay.
Where Gestalt, who we haven't even met yet, is sort of the real villain of the game, but we're kind of being introduced to the Empire through Kefka, who is almost like this sidekick sort of character.
Yeah.
And
he's not a very serious person.
No.
He's crazy. One of the most interesting ways that they introduce him right at this part at Figaro Castle is that he doesn't like Emperor Gestalt.
No.
And he's very open about it. Mm-hmm. And he's not happy that he has to go do what Emperor Gestalt wants. And it's like, this is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And as we keep playing the game, you see the soldiers don't like him.
No,
like there's some crazy political stuff happening here where it's like Gestalt doesn't like Kefka, but Kefka is in charge of the soldiers, but the soldiers don't like Kefka either. But the Emperor Gestalt trusts Kefka. But anyways, it's this really weird kind of like web. And you can tell that there's some possibly some divisive stuff happening at the Gestalian Empire, right? Yeah. And that not everybody, anyways, they all don't love each other.
Yeah.
And usually you'd have this very severe like deference to the authority.
Yeah,
that's
loyalty.
Above you. Yeah. But that's just not right for Kefka, nor is it for Gestalt, nor is it for a lot of people. So it's very, very strange. And then, of course, you have the classic line here. By Kefka as he's walking up and he's, there's sand in my boots. And everyone's like, oh, of course. And they go brush his feet off.
Yeah.
That is absolutely so funny. It's great. And this is, I think, the first time, at least for me, maybe you heard it in that Terra flashback. But this is the first time I remember hearing the laugh.
I think this is the first part.
Yeah, and that's a very specific sound effect for this game. I had never heard it anywhere else. But
I'm pretty
except
sure
for like maybe Chrono Trigger. But.
This would technically be the first Final Fantasy character to be given a voice.
That's true. There you go.
Like an actual voice, right? A laugh. It's dialogue, but it's a voice, right?
Right. It's not what you would expect either. No. It's very strange. Although, so I did end up watching that FMV, that new intro that they made in the late 90s.
Yeah, the FMV.
Like it's interesting. I much prefer the pixel art to that, at least in part because you see Kefka and you see the madness, you see his face, you see like you're introduced to that right at the beginning in the FMV.
More sinister in the FMV.
Yeah, totally. Whereas in the with the pixel art, they're having to use a lot of dialogue and a lot of maybe some animations, and the way that he's presented in the pixel art, it's not so clear what's going on there like with his face or with anything like that.
Right.
They have to do other creative things to make him seem crazy. They give him this voice, right? This laugh. Mm-hmm. The way that he's written is just like completely psycho. Even in the Japanese, he's pretty psycho.
Yeah.
More psycho in the English version, though, especially the SNES version I'm playing. But seeing that FMV, I feel like I don't like it.
You're not a fan of it?
I don't like that I saw Kefka. I don't like that I saw his face in the FMV.
Like a sinister expression.
Yes.
This goes back to...
And it's not just that. It's his whole character. I don't know. I would rather be introduced to it here in this manner than in the FMV where I'm already kind of like, ooh, what's up with this guy,
Yeah, sure.
This is much better.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about. I don't know if it was last time or first episode or whatever, where the difference in presentation between a theatrical versus a cinematic approach to exactly. Showing you what a character's thinking and feeling, right? And that FMV you're talking about is very cinematic in presentation.
Very much so, which is not, like we mentioned, that not the right treatment for this game.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Now, either way, you can have a character that more or less looks like that. That's fine. I don't know. I guess my point is like the way that they portray him here. He's absolutely off his rocker. He is insane. And I love this introduction. It would almost be like they added a new scene at the beginning of The Dark Knight where the Joker is like you see him in a different way. And then the introduction later on isn't as powerful because of how we'd already been introduced to him previously.
That's an interesting point. Isn't the first time you see the Joker in that movie is when he walks into the room with the mafia dudes all meeting about what are we going to do with the Batman thing? Now, and he does the pencil through the guy's eye.
Yes.
That's
it's
the
such
first
a
time
good intro.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you had seen him previous to that, but he was wearing that big mask for the bank heist.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But so you had seen him, but the real character intro came at that point. Right. And to that degree, it's possible that could undercut my point a little bit. But I feel like having a more solid intro at this point is much, much better than what the FMV kind of hinted at and showed. At the very beginning.
Like alluded to.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
Even with Terra and all of that.
It's an interesting point, too, because, like, and this is a whole further discussion that may someday happen about like Final Fantasy VII Remake or something like that, where you create something with the anticipation that your audience already knows,
exactly,
kind of a thing,
yes.
right? And
like
when
Advent
is that
children.
appropriate to do versus, well, but there are people who are, this is their first exposure to the thing.
Tons.
And is this the right time to show, it's a good question.
You know what? Reading the comments from our last episode, man, a ton of people are going to be playing this game for the first time.
Yeah, I was surprised by that
along with
too.
us on this podcast.
I was surprised by that too.
And a ton of people haven't played it yet. And in that way, I'm like, good. Do the SNES or maybe the Game Boy Advanced, but the FMVs. Did the Game Boy Advanced include those?
No,
FMVs?
it didn't.
Okay. I just probably would rather have the game without them. But they're cool. They look really cool.
Yeah, the thing that I appreciate about them is that they very closely sort of resemble the Amano concepts.
Yeah.
Like even Shadow has like blue skin underneath his like black
sweet.
mask, and so like, you probably didn't see that part.
I actually ended up watching all of them.
Oh, you saw all of them.
Well, I thought I was just watching the intro FMV. I didn't know. Apparently, there are FMVs going throughout.
Kind of
the
throughout
whole game.
different parts.
I watched. Yeah. Apparently, I've already played the game for, so it didn't ruin anything. But I watched all the. Somebody just lined them all up, and it was like 8 minutes long. Yeah. And it took me about halfway through to where I was like, "Oh wait, this isn't." Oh, okay.
This isn't,
because I thought it was sort of like in Final Fantasy VIII or something where they're showing some flashbacks or
montage, sort of.
Yeah, some edits of the game in the future of what will happen. I thought that's what was happening, and I'm like, I don't like what they're doing here, man. At some point, I was like, oh, these are just
they
edited
kind
together.
of do that. I think I must have watched the same video you did, because they kind of do that. And some very brief ones where they show like the opera scene and the coin scene and a couple other things. But then it goes into the Terra and Kefka, and she's getting into the matchstick armor, and they march off, and the door opens, and it like
so they did show some of
that. Was kind of the end. It's just a few brief ones, but then after that, they actually show several scenes. Where you get the full scene.
So real quick, let me get this straight. In the intro FMV, they showed that clip.
Of Kefka?
The coin flip and the montage stuff in the intro FMV.
A couple, yes.
Okay.
Yes, a couple
I have
like that.
Very big problems with the intro FMV now, even bigger than what I had just previously mentioned, because that shouldn't have been shown. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
but to those who don't know what we're talking about, that's fine. I wouldn't recommend you play that version, except that it's kind of cool to every 2 hours of gameplay see a 5-second FMV. Like, it's kind of cool. I don't know that it's worth it.
I think if you played the game before,
if you played before, no big deal. Whatever. If this is your first time, maybe the remaster, or what was it called?
Pixel remaster.
Which apparently is like coming out soon, but it's not quite.
Well,
out
it's
yet
out on
Switch,
PC, but the
Switch.
console versions are coming out soon.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So some people holding out for those. Totally understand. Awesome. Play this game in whatever mode best fits you.
Right.
But if you're playing the anthology, is that what it's called?
Anthology is
that's what has the FMVs.
The PS1
on it, right?
version. Yes.
Anyways, just know that. Well, maybe just don't pay too much attention to those FMVs. How about that?
Okay, so sand in my boots. They wipe it off, and pathetic. They walk up to the castle. Yeah. So I guess to set this up a little bit, Edgar and his kingdom, Figaro, have an alliance with the Empire.
Yes.
But in some of the dialogue, I was talking about this a little bit with Pat Holloman, who's been a guest on the show a couple times.
Yeah.
And, we mentioned it a little bit last time, too, about how concise, the dialogue is in this game, how much they say with so little. And I'm going to comment on that in a bit more depth as to how maybe in some instances it may hurt the game a little bit, that it so quickly, goes through big, important sort of, key points of the plot. But for this particular section, this whole Figaro section, I really actually loved
it.
how they are able to establish kind of exactly the things you need to know.
Yes.
And no more.
No more.
To give you a really good picture of the political landscape here.
And for that whole scene to kind of take place well, including the escape and all of that. They gave us everything really worked perfectly, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, without belaboring the point or overstaying their welcome or making the scene take forever.
Yeah.
So what they are able to establish here is that Edgar is in like a fake alliance with the Empire, right? And he's actually working with the Returners, and Locke is acting as his like go-between there.
Yeah.
That he's sort of like keeping a front here as a means to be able to keep his eye on the Empire. But the Empire is currently like going from kind of kingdom to kingdom and just taking over like all over the world. They're just like taking down all of these different places. And so it's getting to a point where like this can't continue. Like obviously nobody is safe. I mean, right after this, after the Returners hideout, we're going to see them attacking Doma. But I think one of the things that Edgar says is, and again, this is the advanced version of the script, you wouldn't be thinking of invading my kingdom next, would you? We have an alliance. And then I hear you've been busy down south taking over a country or three. Just what is the Empire up to? So it's just a couple of lines, but it sort of like establishes the fact that like the world is just kind of slowly falling to this expanding empire. And obviously Figaro has really no shot of standing up to them. But it also makes me sort of wonder about what we learned last week, which is because we were talking about the differences in the script. In the SNES version, Arvis, the old man who helped Terra back in Narsh, says, oh, this town has no chance, stands no chance against the Empire. But what it really should have said is they're like one of the few nations that can stand up to them, but they won't.
The will to do it.
They remain neutral.
Oh, right. Oh, so they don't have the will. They have the ability, but not the will.
Yes.
Something like that, yeah.
Right. And so it's like, wow, Narsh is really, really powerful then.
Apparently those five houses in Narsh, really well stocked up and armored.
Yeah, I mean, like technologically, they must be fairly advanced because we're seeing evidence here that the Empire is just like, I mean, just kingdoms are dropping like flies as they expand and take over.
Yeah.
But Narsh apparently has, the power to actually stand up against them. So that's gonna come into the strategy or the planning of the Returners here in the scene that we'll come to in a minute. But
it could be also the Narsh has a little bit more wealth than the other places, being that they have a mine.
I think that's true, yes.
Yeah, so they have resources, they have money, they have tools, like they're capable. They're just very capable people.
Yeah. Any place with, the resources of that kind are going to,
metal,
well, it would become a complicated situation to like take over a place like that because their exports, you need them to wage your war in the first place, right? So they have a lot of leverage there.
Right. So if you take it over, now you either enslave them or you send your own people to run those mines.
Right.
But it's like, it's better to just have a mutually beneficial, trade rather than like a forced, system that could totally ruin your whole empire.
Right. So that would give Narsh quite a large advantage, actually, because they probably do a lot of exporting and trading to Gestal, and that's probably what gives them the ability to wage the wars that they're waging. So
that's pretty cool. I like that.
Anyway, there's not a lot said here, like directly. They don't need to like I said, they don't need to sit here and exposit this and belabor the point. But I like how concisely they can paint that picture about like the political landscape without giving us unnecessary detail. Yeah, and that's something that I think a lot of JRPGs today could learn from. Now, of course, a large part of this is the fact that Woolsey was so limited in the amount of text he could even put into the thing. And even in this version, they add a few extra lines onto some things where he only had one sentence. Like,
sure.
In this version, they'll add another sentence or two
events,
to give you a little bit more
extra boxes
than the original. But
okay, so Sniper LAN has just a great little comment here.
I mean, this is a fair point. Yes.
It's a fair point, and this may have been what Woolsey was taking into account when he rewrote,
changed that part.
Took some liberties. Sniper LAN wrote, apparently 3 Magitech armors are enough to take Narsh. So there's that. Right? Well, I don't know. That's that kind of... that's a good counterpoint, I suppose. Maybe Narsh isn't as super popular, or maybe they took him by surprise because it was nighttime. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's other ways that could be explained. And you'll find this in basically every Final Fantasy game's plots. Like all the plots of Final Fantasy have points like that sort of contradict the logic of the world. And it's clear that they just didn't care that much about that.
And I don't either.
It's
I don't
not that
really care.
important.
Because in like we mentioned so many times, like I just mentioned, there's 5 houses in Narsh, right? Okay, yeah. Well, the Narsh is probably a big sprawling town.
Yeah.
It's probably the 3 Magitech. That was probably 3 people that were representative of an entire invading force, right?
Yeah.
It was probably like the abstraction, can.
Yes.
It's very easy to forgive RPGs with things like this because we know what they were likely trying to imply, and we filled it in with our minds. We're not like I want to say we're not stupid, but like we're not ignorant of the fact that the limitations mean they have to present things in a certain way, but that it's actually really cool and really fun that a lot of the world building in an RPG, especially an SNES era RPG, is done in your own mind.
Yeah, it's left to the imagination.
And you're filling in the gaps, and that's really useful in a game or in any kind of media that relies on the player to kind of help fill in the story for them, because you're going to put in some super cool stuff that they wouldn't have been able to show you. Anyways, with the abstraction stuff, it's not too big of a problem. I forgive it very easily.
I think, a lot of these things are easy to kind of look over for that exact reason. But I'm going to circle back to a thought I just had about 3 Magitech armors being able to do that. Okay. I think when we get to the council scene, Terra being part of it too.
She's pretty powerful.
But on top of that, anyway, I'll recircle onto the Magitech in a second.
Let's do it.
Let's get through Figaro first, though.
One thing I loved is that Edgar, as soon as I think it was right when Kefka shows up, Edgar kind of takes a few steps forward and then turns back around and talks a little bit more to his advisor or to Locke, and then takes a few more steps and then comes back. And then he goes up and talks to Kefka, and it's like, okay, I think there was a line somewhere here that Edgar would do well to act more kingly.
Oh,
right?
Sure.
That he's kind of a little, people don't respect him a ton. Like, he's not the most, he doesn't command authority maybe the way a typical king would or should. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was really funny. He's definitely playing a part that's a little bit
I'm pretty sure that Sabin has a line a little later about like, won't you ever grow up, brother, or something like that, So, I mean, obviously he's
that's
a womanizer.
To him hitting on
he
girls.
Hits on all the girls in the castle and everything. So, anyway, so he asks Kefka, like, why have you come here, basically? And again, maybe now is the time to at least kind of start on this point, which is a larger point I wanted to make, especially based on some of the comments we received from last week about the overratedness of Final Fantasy VI.
Stop it, people.
Now, I'm not trying to like belittle anybody or anything like that. I think I actually think there are some. I think there are actually some very seriously valid points in this regard.
Sure.
But hopefully we can provide some context here that might help people understand a little better, like how some people might be reading it versus the way others are reading it. The first time I played Final Fantasy VI, I felt that way too. I was like, wow. And I think I talked about this a little bit last time, right? Like, I wasn't like
backwards.
I wasn't that impressed with like the writing of Final Fantasy 4 or 6 or 5 when I played them the first time. I was like, wow, because I had played 7 and I was kind of expecting that, and I didn't know any of this about translation and character limits, and these little cartridges only hold like 30 megabits of data in them. So like, it's like
floppy disk.
It's like, even text is like it becomes a limit, which sounds insane today with the storage capacity for things we have now,
crazy.
Right? Anyway, point is, I felt similarly, so I kind of have some sympathy for that sort of like point of view. And to kind of build upon what we talked about last week with this being, these games, the Super Nintendo ones in particular, being more theatrical in their presentational style and abstraction.
When you brought that up last episode, I feel like that was huge, not just for me, but I feel like that could be huge for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that it was likely intentional.
Yeah. So I started, my first Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VII, which was clearly, I mean, it still has its theatrical presentational aspects, but they were definitely adding more cinematic elements to it too. Yoshinori Kitase wanted to be a filmmaker before he went into the game industry, similar to, what's his name? Metal Gear Solid guy.
Hideo Kojima.
And
others.
Final Fantasy Tactics guy. My brain is not working right now.
Oh, yeah.
Matsuno.
I love him. Yeah, Matsuno.
So like Matsuno, Hideo Kojima, Kitase, these were all people who aspired to be filmmakers first.
That's
right?
Yeah.
They grew up with that dream in mind. And so in that PlayStation era where they got a camera finally, right? They took full use of it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had that expectation of the presentation going backwards when really it was Tokashi Tokita in Final Fantasy IV, who was sort of like the assistant director, you could say, under Sakaguchi. He was a theater major.
Oh, interesting.
And so
cool.
Final Fantasy IV was much more inspired. Now, there are other quotes too, and I know some people have read or might bring up about how they wanted to model certain things off of movies. That was there too. But what I'm saying is Tokashi Tokita was a theater major, and he wanted the dramatic gravitas of a stage play to be how this felt.
Yeah.
And that was also true here. So when you think about the differences between stage plays versus cinema in how they write the dialogue, how they perform said dialogue, you have to realize, like, this is not going for realism necessarily.
Yeah, not really.
Right? And I don't think this is either. And I don't think it can, because you don't have enough words to type into the box to like realistically portray the dialogue in a cinematic sort of convincing human way. You'd have to do it more of that over-the-top, melodramatic was a word you brought up.
Yeah.
Theatrical, more exaggerated form.
Yeah.
So you're going to see that in a lot of this dialogue. And I think if you have that expectation about it and you're reading it that way, that's, theater is not any less a high art form than cinema is. And in fact, for a long, long time, cinema was considered, just like games nowadays, people don't really consider them on the level of film or something like that. Cinema was considered this, low art form in comparison to the theater. And, And so, but it's just a different style. And so the dialogue is very concise. It's very compressed. It's very simple. But that's where they're drawing the emotion is more in a similar fashion to how dialogue in the theater is versus a movie. Yeah. Does that make sense? So anyways, I wanted to bring that point up because it sounds funny and very obvious and on the nose, right? Almost in like a children's book kind of way or something. Yeah. That Edgar would say, this wouldn't have to do with that witch everyone's been whispering about, would it? And Kefka's attempt to deflect that is, lies, she merely stole something of minor value. Is she here? Now, if you're reading that in a cinematic voice, that doesn't seem very believable as a line of dialogue or response if you're trying to convince somebody, oh, no, it's not a big deal. But then why are you here? Why did you bring soldiers? Why are you so interested? Yeah. It's obvious it's more than that. This is very, it's not subtle dialogue. But it's theatrical in presentation, and it's getting across in a way that we've been talking about in terms of abstractions, a point that you have to project and exaggerate on the stage to get the point across to the people in the back.
In fact, the way that you read it just now is the way I would expect a line like that to have been performed.
Yeah.
In fact, possibly intending to be comedic.
To be funny.
Right, like nonsense. I don't care about that girl. Is she here? And but really overdoing it and and then you could imagine the crowd gets a little chuckle out of that, And then that to just assume that they're going for this hardcore, super serious movie, you know, I don't know, something like James Bond or something like.
Well, James Bond could be pretty.
James Bond's pretty
campy back in the day.
I actually was thinking of
more of the modern. More of the modern Bond films are much more that way.
Yeah, the modern ones. I'm trying to think of like Inception. I don't know, just whatever.
Yeah, something like super dramatic and serious.
And a dramatic action movie that's expected to be like Leonardo DiCaprio with his like furrowed brow, looking very serious, you know. And it's like that's just not what this is.
No.
And to the extent that you're disappointed that it's not that has an issue to do with your expectations,
yes.
and a lot of people didn't know, like when you played FF6, it's no one's fault that you had those expectations.
No.
It's not their fault. It's not your fault. It's just you expected a thing and got something else, and you expected to bite into an apple and it was an onion.
Yeah.
Onions are really good, but you have to do certain things to them.
You have to be
just bite
expecting
them
if you
like it's an apple.
If you expect an apple and you get an onion, it's not going to be pleasant.
That's a problem. You're not going to have a good time. Okay, I think
so. Anyway, that's kind of my point here.
Yeah,
I want to point out, and that like. I think a lot of people who may struggle with the dialogue or thinking it's not well written, maybe the reason is because you're expecting something akin to the PlayStation era games, which became more cinematic, became more pushed more in that direction than these did. And part of that was because of necessity, which we've already said many times. But part of it was just the reins passing to Katase, who wanted to be more cinematic in the presentation.
Right.
And that's kind of not what Final Fantasy was previous to that time. It was very much more theatrical in style. So anyway, if you read it in that way, I think you'll have kind of a different sort of, you'll think differently about, you know, its level of effectiveness, I guess. So Edgar goes on to say, that's a tough one. There are more girls here than grains of sand in the desert. A man can't possibly keep track of them all. I mean, it's genuinely funny.
It's very funny, and it's so Edgar. It's just like, it's just great. Like you can imagine. Like, trust me, I've tried. I've tried to account for every young maiden in this castle, and I can't even do it. You know?
Yes, exactly. So Kefka, you know, goes on to say, you know, I would. I'd be afraid for what would happen to you if we come to find out that you're hiding her from us. Hee hee hee, and they sort of like walk off, right? A little bit sinister note that he leaves on there. And then he, you know, tells Locke to take Terra to her room where she's going to stay that night, and that they need to start making plans, start making a strategy for how they're going to deal with this situation. There's actually two scenes that we're going to go over today where Locke and Terra have kind of a one-on-one. And I really liked them both. So here, you know, he tells her to follow him. They go into the sort of tower there. And he says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drag you around without giving you a chance to rest. And she's like, it's funny because it's almost like it's hard to relate to the affliction which Terra has. Where she just basically woke up with no idea who she is, and he's going around talking like this, and okay, your name's Locke, right? Like he's kind of forgetting almost like how basic he's got to be in how he talks to her. He said, Edgar told me about you. Is it true that you're a thief? So she doesn't even know if she should be trusting anybody.
Right.
This is like the really important key thing here. Like, it's obvious to us playing the game, like, because again, the style of presentation, Kefka's evil. All empires and RPGs are bad. All kingdoms are good. So this is an empire that means they're bad. Kingdom of Figaro means they're good. But in this character's perspective, not really having any memory whatsoever, having no idea who she should trust, she doesn't really know anybody from the empire as of right now. She only knows these people who have talked about the returners and how evil the empire is, but she doesn't know. So she's like, you're a thief? Am I hearing this right? Like, should I even be listening to you? I don't even know if I want to talk to you. And of course, his I'm a treasure hunter thing, like, get it right. I'm so sick of explaining this. He says, on the surface, Edgar pretends to support the Empire. Truth is, he's collaborating with an underground resistance group called the Returners. I serve as their go-between. The old band that you met in Narsh is one of us, too. And then she says, the Empire, but I'm an Imperial soldier. So you're my enemy. Like, why are you talking to me like you're my friend? Like, She's just so confused.
Yeah.
And then he says, not anymore. They were using you. The things are different now. And she says, it's just, I don't know what I should do. Whenever I try to think, it just makes my head hurt worse. All that matters is that you make your own decisions from now on, he says. You don't have to think too hard right now. You'll know what you want to do when the time comes. And she says, but how will I know which choice is right?
Yep.
I really like how they leave that off.
And they kind of left it there.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, Locke can't do any more at this point. Like, we understand her dilemma. They don't need to belabor the point past that line.
Yeah.
Like, how will she know? And Locke could say something. He could give some, like, Jiminy Cricket advice that's useless and that's just like, well, you know when you know, and you just, your heart feels it. And it's like, you can't, there's nowhere to go here. And I love it. It feels really nice when scenes get left on a point like this, right? It's indecisive, but they don't need to, like, belabor the point. I think that's very good.
Yeah, and I think it's just really easy to understand the conflict that would be going on. To imagine waking up one day and you're in the middle of this war, and you were apparently a soldier in that army, and the people who are the enemies are telling you, no, they were controlling you and all this stuff. But it's like, but I must have been there for a reason, right?
You would have to. It's almost like
trust yourself,
trust your past self. Yeah. I probably made the right decision joining their military to begin with.
Right. Like, I must have, right? Was I really a slave? It would be so. Yeah. It would be so hard to go through something like that.
Oh, that would. And I think crazy.
That they portray her doubt of herself, of everyone around her, really well. And I love that they give you the choice to join the returners or not when you get to their hideout.
Yeah,
like, you can say no to Bannon.
You can.
If you want,
yes.
Right? I really like that they did that.
One other thing here, this actually, as soon as you bring it up this way, it makes a little bit more sense. When you first play Final Fantasy VI and you get to that point where the old man takes off the slave crown, right? And then you're introduced to Locke right at the beginning.
Yep.
And the old man says, so are you still a treasure hunter, right? Yeah. Was Terra present in that room?
No, she had already gone into the caves at that point.
I was going to say that would make sense. His reaction, his crazy reaction would have made more sense. But maybe not.
So, like, her first introduction to Locke would have been when she woke up from being unconscious in the cave and this guy's just carrying her out.
Wait, that's another crazy thing.
I know.
My gosh.
Right?
Yeah. Her life has been a mess so far.
I know. It's like, you can be very understanding as to why she doesn't necessarily want to trust these people, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, the next day, or I guess hours later, maybe Edgar sort of wakes up and
as Edgar and get what's happening. Fire. What do you hear? Boom! You hear
the bell. The bell. Right.
You wake up. You don't even know what's happened yet. Everything's dark. Edgar gets out of bed. All you hear is the dong and the bell, dong, and it's the same thing I brought up last episode. And then you start hearing the snare drums playing before you even see any fire. Yep. Right, you hear the bell tolling, which means people are dying, and then the snare drums, which means an army is approaching, and you already know it from the audible cues, and you step out, and the whole castle's just on fire.
Yep.
And at this point, I can remember my first playthrough of the game being like, I don't know, like, this is it. The castle's done for, you know?
Yep.
The castle's done for. What's going to happen now? Having no idea how they were going to get out of this one. Except you look at the sprites and it doesn't appear that anyone's, like, dying yet.
They're like running and jumping really fast, like, in that really funny way that they did back then when they animated people classic. Being scared.
Yeah, it's so funny. But this whole scene I actually really liked. I liked it a ton. This is when this is the famous line from Kefka, "Welcome to my barbecue."
Yep.
Because he asks, "Are you going to give me the girl?" And Edgar's like, "No." And he says, "Well then, welcome to my barbecue."
Yep.
In the Japanese, he says, "Then you'll all burn to death." That's what he says in Japanese.
So I should mention this. Any direct reference to death or the word death like that was censored in English as part of Nintendo of America's censorship policies. Crazy. So, like, you'll hear a character saying, like, "Go get them," when really he's saying, "Kill them."
Kill them, yeah.
And so, like, the Japanese version obviously would have had Kefka saying something much more sinister and harsh there than whatever he says.
And then the English version, it's just silly and clownish, but it still fits his character to some extent, but that's not what he said. Yeah,
so, bring me the girl now. I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh? then enjoy the barbecue. In the other version, welcome to my barbecue, which I actually like a little better.
Welcome to my barbecue.
It's one of the few instances where I actually appreciate the SNES sentence a little more than the retranslated sentence. But I don't know if you noticed this. A couple things. First of all, depending on how much exploration of the castle you had done,
I had done quite a bit.
You would have gone to a place where a man talked about the castle having an engine room.
Yes.
It's like
and also saying that not the pyres, like the turrets of the castle had turbines in them.
Right.
What's the use of that?
Right.
This is a castle.
Yeah, right. So it's like a castle having an engine. You mean a boiler room? Do you mean like what are you talking about? Engine room. So that's one kind of small plant to get your mind kind of be like, wait a minute.
Pretty cool.
But also, did you notice the Beavis and Butthead reference from the two soldiers? So,
maybe.
Have you seen the fire?
I don't think I have.
From Beavis and Butthead.
I don't think I've seen that before. We'll probably have to play a clip here.
Fire.
So,
I probably read the lines and had no idea it was a reference to that.
Yeah, so it is. So Woolsey did that for the two soldiers. They're just saying, fire. And they're kind of like chuckling like that. And they kept it in this
read
version
that. I just thought that they were, how would you put it? Different people. I thought that there was something going on with those people being kind of childish and strange.
But yeah, that's what it's from. And so they kind of kept it for the advanced version. It's kind of become a beloved sort of, pop culture reference there. So anyways, then Edgar goes to one of his soldiers, says, get her ready. And Kefka, ooh, had a change of heart. Seems I have no choice. Or perhaps I do. And he jumps over onto the chocobo and rides around. It's so cool.
Okay, now you can look at this and be like, that is like so cheesy, that is so campy, and I don't care. This scene is awesome. Even playing it today, I don't know. I watch it and I'm just like, this is how games used to be, man. This is how games used to be, and it's awesome. There is nothing wrong with it.
Yep.
The whole castle then, after they kind of jump out, I guess this happens a little bit later, but after they jump off, and then the chocobos kind of do a little loop-de-loop. They don't just run straight away. They kind of go around a little just to kind of show you, like, they're having fun with it. It's like the Mask of Zorro. It's just a fun moment that's just like, ha, we got it.
High adventure.
Yeah, high adventure, just like fun. The whole world is open ahead of us now, and we gave them the slip, and they, it's really cool. I absolutely love it. Then, as the chocobos are running away, the whole castle submerges and Edgar's able to make that happen. Yep. And I'm just thinking Xenogears the whole time I'm watching it.
So some people brought this up, even though we had mentioned it in episode 1, that Renee and Roni, which were the names of characters in Xenogears, are actually references. Well,
it's the middle names.
Soria Saga. Right? Yes, they're the middle names of. I keep want to say Mash. Mash is his Japanese name. Sabin and Edgar. Yeah. So Soria Saga, who wrote Xenogears, wrote this scenario for these two characters. And so their middle names are Roni and Renee. And they live in the desert. Have a desert kingdom like Ave. And anyway, so there's kind of a lot that kind of carried over from 6 into Xenogears from this particular scenario. Which it's fun. It's cool. You can see that, these people were sort of developing a lot of the ideas for their own thing.
Yeah.
Which was a big part of the development story of like Final Fantasy, which I'll talk a lot more about when the retrospectives release later this year. But Tetsuya Takahashi, Kaori Tanaka / Soria Saga, Kitase Nomura, these guys were junior developers who had sort of earned their way up to be, now we're ready to be senior developers.
Yeah,
we're ready to lead projects of our own. We don't want to just make your games forever, Mr. Sakaguchi. Please let us do our own thing. Yeah. And this was kind of the pinnacle moment of disagreements, of people wanting to do their own thing, and you can see some of those ideas were even here, just like creeping up and then carried over into their own things later. And a lot of these junior developers right here became senior developers
like right after this. Yeah. And partially because of this.
Yeah, created their own IPs or took Final Fantasy games in their very own kind of personal directions with FF8. So a lot of that was kind of going on under the hood here. And I feel like this was like a stepping stone towards that, where Sakaguchi was like, I'm too busy to like direct this game like I did before. So why don't all of you, my sons and daughters, like you all get to be scenario writers this time. Like you take these characters and you take those characters and you can kind of do it your own way, and then we'll kind of pull it together.
You know what's
make
funny?
It work.
Once you give a lot of people that kind of freedom into working on a video game where they get that much input, you don't just then go to the next project and say, okay, now go back to your seat where you have no input.
Making maps again.
You end up, exactly. You end up elevating them to this point where you then have to kind of, it would feel like a demotion. It would be demoralizing for them to then go back to where they were in FF4. Yeah. And it's like you have to then let them shine, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, very good.
Yeah, but it's just cool, particularly after having covered Xenogears, to see a little sliver of Xenogears right here in Final Fantasy VI with this scene. So,
and what I love too, so as the super awesome, you can almost hear Indiana Jones music playing when they jump on that chocobo. It's just like, it's so good. But they run away, and then the mech soldiers kind of catch up, and we have a little fight. And this is the first time that Edgar or Locke see Terra's abilities in battle.
Well, it depends on if you used magic when going towards Figaro from Narsh.
I suppose I did.
So this is kind of the funny part.
The scene still plays the same, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Well, actually, so I played this 2 different times because I was looking at 2 different translations. In one instance, Terra got killed one-hit shot right away. So this scene didn't play until later because she wasn't able to cast magic in a battle until I was in the caves going towards South Figaro or something like that. But it is funny that Locke, I mean, unless you just attacked with Terra, I guess, just physical attacked all the way there, and you didn't use any magic, he should have seen this already in random battles leading up to Figaro to begin with. But I guess he just, that was magic? Are you serious? kind of a thing.
It makes sense. It makes a little more sense for Edgar.
Yeah.
And obviously Edgar is just wildly attracted to this woman, Terra. Sure. And so that made sense. Locke being kind of like right there with him is just a funny addition, I guess. Yeah. But so it's so funny because when Edgar first meets Terra, he says, "Oh, I guess your abilities would be a distant third," right?
Yeah,
He's very attracted to her looks and her personality and her voice and all of this stuff. But now, as soon as he sees her abilities, he's just like, they both like swoon and like they like faint off of the camera. Yeah. And it's all happening while the enemies are still there. Yeah. The enemies are still there.
And if this is not evidence enough that this is not meant to be realistically portrayed, that this is very theatrical and abstract.
Think about this. In a play, you would totally stop in the middle of a sword fight and step forward and deliver a soliloquy or a song or whatever, and then step back in and finish the fight. Sure. That would happen in a play.
Yes, 100%.
It would not happen in a movie.
No.
Unless it's a weird musical movie, which some maybe.
Yeah, musicals could do that.
They could do something like that. But yeah, this is clearly a play or a musical, if you will.
Well, this is kind of funny too, because like I grew up like really hating musicals. I just like the whole medium, I guess. I was just like, I'm not into it. And as I've grown older, I sort of realized the town did not break out into song when the Wells Fargo truck pulled in. You're not supposed to believe that that's what happened.
I know. Just, you take it too literally.
It's an expression of excitement from a small town that they're getting mail from somewhere else. It's just that's telling you a story about the history of the town and the spirit of the town in in song form, right? But I'm not supposed to take from that scene everybody burst out in harmony and danced,
actually happened,
and that literally happened, right? And this is a similar thing. Final Fantasy VI is full of this type of presentation. So I really, really feel strongly you are meant to be interpreting Final Fantasy VI as a stage performance of little people, little tiny characters inside of
What was the word?
A diorama.
A diorama, that was it. A miniature.
Instead of like a cinematic like performance. Yeah. It's just not meant to be taken that way. And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're all surprised. Holy crap, that's magic.
It's so good. It's so good. So they end up doing their fight. They leave. And this is where Kefka says in English, son of a submariner.
Yeah. They changed that in this
do you
translation.
Know? Okay, what is it?
To sandworm, son of a sandworm.
Okay, well, still. The Japanese was kuso.
Really?
If you've watched anime in Japanese, you will hear that quite often.
It's really different.
It's a reference to excrement. In fact, often they will say kuso in the Japanese version, and it's always translated as something weird in English. But that's in part because I don't think from the English I have not heard a swear word yet. Is that correct?
No, they wouldn't have included that in the original English because it would have been censored for kids. Anyways.
Now, I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it here for those who haven't heard it yet from our previous podcast. But Japanese doesn't have swear words the way that English does.
Yeah.
There's just they just have overly rude ways of talking. Like the whole sentence becomes a swear word as opposed to just one word that's like, oh, you don't use that word. Like they use kuso to be like snot is hanakuso.
Yeah.
Earwax is mimikuso.
Yeah.
It's just the word that they use for like crap,
something
like
slimy, gross.
Just gross things that come out of your body, right? But when they just say kuso, it is obviously meant to be something along the lines of a swear word in English. But when the localizers are like, well, we don't do like English, that's like a bigger deal. We don't just throw swear words around in English for like games that we want to market towards like young kids.
Yeah.
Now maybe that's changing today, but in the early 90s that was a big deal, and especially with the ESRB.
Yeah.
Well, this game was rated teen, I think, right? Teen?
I don't remember. I think it was E. I'm pretty sure it was E.
Was it E? Oh my gosh, hold on. We have to
because Nintendo of America was hardcore about what they would censor on these games to get them to be E. Like, on top of like any sort of profanity or references to sexuality, for sure anything to religion.
Yes, it did. No, look at that T.
It was T. Huh.
The next 4 games have E10 plus. The first game is E. Oh yeah, and then
so the Super Nintendo game. So
6 was the very first T-rated game.
Huh.
But was that just in Japan or ESRB is just American?
Well, ESRB is American.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just
it's crazy. Interesting.
Oh, anyways, okay, so it is rated teen. I'm just saying that swear words is something that Nintendo, I guess, and a lot of these early games were very much more sensitive about. Yep. And so you will see kuso, and I'll bring it up many times, translated as all sorts of crazy things. It's not like the most common word in Japanese for when people are upset, but they use it a lot in anime and video games.
Yeah, you hear it all the time in anime.
Yes.
All the time.
yes. All the freaking time, man.
Okay, so this next little scene, as they're riding off and escaping, I liked this a lot, too. And I actually played a third translation, just for I'm not playing the game 3 times.
Was this a fan?
It is a fan-translated one. And this was the one instance of anything I had seen so far where I actually liked the fan-translated version better than any of the others.
Probably more literal, right?
Maybe, but like so what I liked was they're explaining to her, like, sorry that we freaked out like that. Magic is, just supposed to be gone from the world. We're not supposed to have magic anymore. So seeing that was a shock. And then like, you really should come see our mentor, Bannon, the leader of our resistance. I think he can probably help you understand your powers better. And, I think it'd be really good for you to learn more about yourself and about your powers, to come talk to him. And they begin to become kind of lost in their conversation back and forth, Locke and Edgar, almost to the point like they forget who they're talking about is right there next to them.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Kind of
I remember this, yeah.
So like, oh man, like, she reacted to that Esper. So that must be a connection. And then Edgar says something very specific here, where he says, "I don't know." She says that Esper reacted to your magical powers. There's got to be a relationship. And Tara says, "I don't know any more than you do. These powers just come naturally to me." And he says, "But no human is born with the powers that you seem to have." And then I love the way that they sort of choreograph the scene. Her chocobo just starts to fall behind on that word. But no human is born with these powers.
In other words,
she just...
Yeah, they just said, you're not human.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a huge revelation for anybody.
And then, the other chocobos circle back around kind of slowly. I just love the timing of it all.
Yeah,
and they
really
pull up
good.
and he just apologizes. Like, forgive me. I forgot myself there for a second, right? And the SNES version is similar in how it's worded.
I've got no human is born with the use of magical powers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the fan translated one, they went a little bit further with that. No normal human or no regular human or something like that, right?
That's good.
And it just like hits her like, man, like I'm not normal. I'm not like you. I don't fit in. Like just this is building up in her. She has no idea where she fits in. She has no idea what her identity is at all.
Yeah.
And like even these people who are trying to help her and be nice to her, she doesn't feel like she belongs. And they are admitting she doesn't really belong. And so like it's just a hard thing to know, what should I do? I don't feel like I fit with you, but you're being kind to me.
And I don't know anyone else.
But you're scared of me and you're freaked out when I use these powers.
Yeah.
And so like they're really doing a great job, I feel like, of building this internal conflict for Terra. Even though she's not given nearly as many lines as other characters. They're doing a lot more of the talking. They're doing a lot more of the taking action. But like the real conflict of the game is in her. And I think they did a beautiful job of illustrating that here in the scene. It really hit me. Like this is one of the early scenes where like I actually felt like a strong emotion to that reaction. Having felt something similar, like you don't belong before. People are saying something about you, and you overhear it. And you feel like, like these people, maybe they're pretending, or they don't really like me. They're not really trying to help me. They're trying to use me. Yeah. That's exactly the wrong thing to say if you've been trying to convince her, like he had earlier, we're not like the Empire. We're not going to make you do this. We're going to let you decide. But at the same time, all they can seem to focus on is how this will help them win the war.
It'll help them win the war, and also she's not human. And if someone's not human, do they have rights? Anyways, you can imagine how her mind would just kind of go places where it's just like, are they actually going to help me or not?
Yeah. And so, Edgar feels bad, and it's not until Locke sort of just like, please come with us. And she kind of gives in to him. It's usually him. He'll kind of have this like gentle sort of interaction with her, whether it was back at Figaro Castle, whether it's going to be here in a minute in the Returner's hideout after the whole Bannon scene, which is a very similar thing happens.
Yes, very similar.
Bannon speaks in a way that's very not very concerned with her feelings, and Locke has to kind of soften that. And so, like, she likes him. She likes Locke. Yeah. Even though she doesn't know if she should trust a thief.
I don't know. There's something appealing about a thief.
That's true, actually. But anyway, really, really good scene. I thought that was really well executed overall. So they decide they got to go to South Figaro, which is through a cave. Not really much to speak of there. They go through. They come to the town itself.
It's cool. I like the town. It looks cool. It's a pretty big town,
and
it's fun.
There will be more to talk about here when Locke comes back later. Yeah. But this is a place that's about to be occupied by the Empire. And really the only thing I took any mental note of here was there's this sort of rich guy that lives in one of the larger houses there, and he's writing a letter, and he's like, don't interrupt me when I'm writing a letter or whatever. And when you revisit the town with Locke later, he feels bad because he was obviously writing and giving some kind of intelligence to an Imperial commander or something like that, which led to the occupation of the town. And then he feels like super guilty, like, why did I...
He said, why did I do that?
I didn't need the money.
I didn't even need the money. Yeah.
So I like that, even like just little things like this, right? Yeah. Again, this is another great example of how concise the dialogue is, but yet it's able to express something pretty profound with that.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, you just have to do a little bit of imaginative work yourself. Yeah. Just a little bit, like a very small amount. And you can have this incredible depth that the game has to offer. Yeah. But, if you're just like reading it, just on its face and taking everything literally, I suppose I can understand a more negative experience with this game.
Yeah, I mean, that particular criticism about the simplicity of the dialogue is not unfounded. I just think that it works for many reasons. One being the form in which they present it, which is abstraction layered on abstraction layered on abstraction. Yeah. So you're already doing this in other aspects. You're doing this when it comes to believing that they walked 20 miles over the course of days instead of 5 seconds to a town where you fought a bunny along the way or whatever. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you're already having to do this work in filling in the gaps of the abstraction. The abstraction is used to get across an idea without presenting it in a literal way. Yeah. And like I said last time, I feel like the dialogue, partly due to the constraints placed on memory restriction, is also doing that. It's presented in a way in which I feel, well, obviously it might not be as obvious as I'm wanting to say now, because I didn't feel that way the first time I played the game, but upon revisiting it, it became more obvious to me that this is also true of the dialogue. That's
a very good way of putting it. Yeah. It may not be readily apparent on its face. It becomes apparent as you take the game more seriously. You see that it's there. The game has that.
And I felt like this particular example with this guy, I mean, I think he says maybe 4 lines or 3 lines total to you.
Yeah.
But I could feel it. I could feel his regret. I could feel his, like, why on earth did I do that? Like, you know, you could sort of, again, fill in the gaps. Imagine a rich man living in this town sees what's happening politically in the world, sees the almost inevitability of the takeover of the empire, has a lot to lose.
True.
Yeah. And what do people who fear having a lot to lose do? They want to try to keep it.
Yes, and they will kind of play both sides a little bit, you know, just to try to make sure that they preserve their spot no matter who ends up being in power.
I can end up... That's exactly right.
So he writes a letter to Gestalt, and he's just like, hey, you know, let's work together.
Yeah, right. And then when it actually comes to pass, when he sees the people of the town suffering and oppressed...
Unless he's a psychopath.
Yeah.
He then has this
I didn't even need the money.
Exactly.
Why did I do that?
So what? Yeah.
And I feel like that comes across really strongly. I think they do a really good job presenting that in, again, super concise language.
Yeah.
And I just think it works. I really do.
Very nice.
Outside of that, I think the only other thing, you meet Shadow here.
Yeah, and his dog.
If you talk to him in the cafe.
The cafe/bar.
It's definitely a bar.
There's another thing that happens later on. We'll get to it later, but this guy wants some cider.
Yeah,
it's sake.
In
Japanese, it's
supposed
sake,
to be alcohol.
Anyways, yes, but yeah. So they're in the. But it's so funny because RPGs and taverns or bars or like they've become ubiquitous, right?
Yeah,
it's like everyone knows that when you play an RPG, you go to the local tavern. But Nintendo wanted to censor all that stuff. I just think that's ridiculous.
Yep.
And also, JRPGs without taverns are not worth playing.
No,
there's another one here. There's another one, and it's the inn, right? But JRPGs need 2 important things in every town. They need a tavern and they need an inn. And this is something that I've always loved is when you stay at an inn in a video game. I've always loved it. It's been something ever since like Mario RPG. It's just been a thing for me. So something that often really bothers me in games is when you go to stay at an inn and the screen just turns black and then turns back on
without the
and
jingle.
you don't get to see him go and lay in the bed.
Walk into the bed and it slowly fades.
Yes. No, I want the satisfaction after a long day of grinding or whatever it is, going to an inn and walking into the bed and laying down and then waking up in the room. It's another room to explore.
Yeah, right.
Like whenever, like, okay, here's a good/bad example. Quest 64. You go in, you go to the inn. I was so excited to go see the inn in that game. And they don't let you. You sit there and it's just a save spot or your health goes up, but it's like there is no actual room in the inn.
We have
That's annoying, man.
Another reason to throw on the trash heap of reasons why that game sucks.
That game, dude. But it was all we had at the time, and it was we made the most of it. But that's when I first realized, like, oh my gosh, they're not going to let me. They're not going to let me see the hotel room. I am so mad.
Yep.
So, Anyways, it's really nice. They got 4 beds, so you can have all 4 of your party members go in. Then you can walk around and just check out the room. Mario RPG, one of my favorite games ever. I'm seeing a ton of stuff because that game was made in 1996 by Squaresoft.
Yep.
And a lot of the same people who worked on this game would have then gone to work on Mario RPG.
Yep.
And a lot of similar themes. And I'm seeing a lot of it coming out too.
Yeah.
And this is part of why this game this game is so good to me. I absolutely love it.
It's awesome. You could also talk to Duncan's widow, although we don't know she's a widow yet. She lives in this town, the Master Duncan.
Up north in the town.
No, she lives in
north?
South Figaro.
Oh, and then
So she'll tell you something like, my husband is training these 2 guys and blah, blah, blah. Sort of the introduction to the next scenario we're going to get with Sabin and Vargas.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I didn't take really very many notes in South Figaro.
Except just be sure to check all the boxes and all the barrels and all the pots. And
Don't do it. Don't, because these items are upgraded later in the game. So if you get the treasure chests you get the items now, they're like weak items.
And you don't get them again
later in the game. Yeah, once you take it, then it's empty. But if you wait till later in the game, I should not have told you this.
Way.
This is the worst person I should have told this to.
Okay, and a little bit of backstory. I tried to
just made a mistake.
I OP every game, and I have serious FOMO. It's all good. It's all good. Now, here's the thing. Had I not played this game before, I would, but I played it before. I do this every time, though.
Well, I don't know how anyone would have
right.
found that out until someone's like, I don't know, digging through the ROM.
Somebody would have to tell me
finding that that's there and then puts it in a game FAQ later on. But it's annoying. So there's all the chests in the Narsh caves earlier, and even in the South Figaro caves. And then the chests inside of the houses of South Figaro are fine to get now. But the pots,
I'm not getting anything more for the rest of the game.
Things, this is the end of it. I promise you.
Serious?
Like right around here, or there might be one area later that has a box or 2. But soon after, they don't do this the whole game. That would be ridiculous. Geez. But soon after this, they will upgrade.
And then
they'll actually upgrade again. So like, don't even get them as lock when you come back. You got to wait till after that. And then you'll get the best items out of those things.
Maybe I missed a couple. I'm not playing this game again. The chat is saying that I have to start over. I won't start over, but that is very disappointing.
Okay,
luckily this game isn't the hardest game ever, and so I can deal.
Also, for the most part, they're not like critically important items.
No,
like,
they tend not to.
You might miss the worst thing you might miss is a ribbon or something like that, right? It's not like you're going to miss an ultra powerful weapon or like something like that. They do become better items, but for the most part, they're items that you could buy somewhere else anyways.
Or yeah.
So it's not that bad to miss them, but just know that I know, audience, that those things become better later.
Well, now I know. Maybe I'll play it again in 20 years, and then I'll do that if I remember. I'll definitely remember that.
Okay.
Jeez.
So let's move up here to Mount Colts and the Vargas.
Okay.
So yeah, like you were saying, there's the little cottage kind of north of town at the base of the mountains.
Yeah.
Where I guess obviously Master Duncan lived and trained his students. And you go in there and you look at things around the room, and Edgar keeps saying, these were his favorite. Oh, but this was his favorite. This was his favorite.
Yeah.
And he realizes, wait, does Sabin live here? So he hasn't seen Sabin in many years, I would assume, while Sabin came here to become a monk and to train in the martial arts with this guy after he left Figaro. So he's seeing all these things, and he's like, oh, he must be here somewhere. And they talk to a guy outside who says, Master Duncan went up to the mountains and he was killed. And his son, Vargas, might be up there as well, and something happened, and so we go to investigate that. And there's not much to speak of in terms of going up the mountain.
No,
you see a shadowy figure.
Yeah,
and that's
hopping
Vargas sort of leading you up.
Yeah.
You eventually meet up with him, and you fight him for a minute. You know, he's like, oh, did Sabin send you, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, you know Sabin? That's my brother. And anyways, he ends up fighting you. you get him down about 700 or 800 HP, and then he just doesn't move, or he kind of blasts everybody back.
Yeah, he blows everyone back, right?
Yeah, and then Sabin enters the scene to have a final showdown with his fellow student, Vargas, who assumed his father had spurned him and was going to give his birthright, or what's the word he uses? He says, he snubbed me, his only son, and chose you as his successor.
Yeah.
And Sabin's response to it was, no, he didn't choose me. He chose you. You were the one he chose. And how could you do that? And he's like, no, lies. Like, he's denying it. That's not possible. Again, there's a lot that you can derive from this very concise, quick, simple dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. It depends on how it's read in your head. Like, I like that they have Sabin sort of, his head sort of bows down and he's sad. Like, no, he chose you as his successor. Like, how tragic a thing that is, even for Vargas. Like, I killed my dad because I thought he snubbed me, but he actually didn't. And his first thing to do then would be deny that, because I was actually just watching this.
He would have to.
I was just watching a video from this great channel I used to follow, JCS Criminal Psychology.
Oh, cool.
It actually started a whole genre on YouTube of basically just interrogation footage of people who are like,
I've seen some of that footage.
Murderers and how they tried to like
psychopaths.
Yeah, and the read technique that that the police use to sort of get confessions out of people, which is not always a good thing. A lot of false confessions. I'm aware of this. Yeah. Just letting you know, it's a fascinating thing to watch. Yeah. And I was just watching one where this guy had beat up his girlfriend, former girlfriend. Did not realize he had killed her, though. And so when they pull him in to investigate him, they assume he knows this. And they're like leading him on with questioning about like what he did. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then they finally reveal to him that she was dead. And he just, for 30 minutes, he's just sitting there. That's not possible. He just cannot accept it. Denial is kind of the first place you go
of course.
With a trauma like that, right? And that's kind of, it reminded me of this scene, right? Where, again, in this very abstract way or very simple way, it's kind of the same sort of scene. I can read the emotion in it. His first thing to be is like, don't stop lying to me. I did not kill my father because he did snub me. Yeah. He had to have done that. You know, like that would be the first reaction. And so he's just gets angry. And so they end up having to fight. Sabin uses the technique. The pummel technique, the blitz. That
Vargas' father
taught him.
He taught you that? It's the oh shoot, the 5, what is in Kill Bill, the 5 method exploding heart technique or whatever?
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, it's he taught that to you. Oh my gosh.
Yep, right.
So that's a big deal.
You're playing on some martial arts film tropes there with that maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he uses it, it kills him. And he's like, oh, it's like, if only you hadn't been so proud, kind of a thing, the regret. This guy was probably his friend, at least for, at some point. Funny story about this. Hironobu Sakaguchi, I want to say it was 2020 or maybe 2019, sometime fairly recently, was doing a live stream with some other people playing Final Fantasy VI.
His live streams are fun, by the way. You guys should watch
They're usually drinking a lot.
Yeah, drink a lot of beer,
having a good time. You get some interesting tidbits about some of the development history by listening to these two. But he got to this point, and he couldn't figure out how to do the blitz, and he actually got a game over.
一番簡単なやつはヨガファイヤーと同じやつだね。
足ちょっと
That's great.
He failed the fetching blitz. He couldn't figure it out. His own game. And everyone's
that's so funny.
Everybody's like making fun of him. It's like, he can't even beat his own game. Like the simplest freaking thing.
So this was, what was this, 22 years after he...
Yeah, after the game came out.
Oh my gosh, that is
yeah,
so
I mean,
funny.
it is kind of an interesting mechanic because I think even when I return to the game, I tend to like, wait a minute, how does this work again? Yeah. Because you click on in the menu, you go down to Blitz, and you click on it, and it puts an arrow onto Sabin's face, like pointing at him, like, okay, now's the time to do it.
Right.
My tendency, and I think probably a lot of people's tendency, or what feels intuitively right, okay, click on Sabin, now I do the input. But that's not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're supposed to click on Blitz, the arrow goes onto him, put the Blitz input in, then press A to confirm the Blitz input, then he does it. And it doesn't tell you this until way far into the fight, because he does like a death spell and you have 60 seconds and it's counting down.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and it starts counting down.
And so it's counting down and you're going like, well, what do I do? I think that was purposeful. But at some point later in the fight, if you're not able to figure it out, Sabin will say, I need to use the Blitz technique like Master taught me, right? And then it'll come on screen and say, select Blitz, press these buttons, then press A to confirm it.
Right.
But it's still vague enough to not be like specifically clear. You have to not click on Sabin, then do it. You have to click so that the arrow goes onto him, then do it, then click on Sabin, and then he'll perform it correctly. So, but the blitzes are really awesome. And this is probably a good time to bring up that I really like how they differentiate the characters in this game. It's not that they do kind of have a class, each one. Kind of.
You can technically give anyone any magic or any abilities, but like they're certainly geared towards specific ones at the beginning, from the beginning. Right. Yeah.
So like
it's loose.
Yeah. So Sabin, I'm not Sabin. Edgar, like he has his tools, right? Because he's a machinist. He's like an inventor. He tinkers with technology. Yeah. So he's got his like auto crossbow and his noise blaster and his bio blaster, which we talked about a little bit last time. But they clearly kind of took from Street Fighter a little bit with Sabin here, and the fighting genre where you have combos you have to put in. Yeah. And like his aura bolt is the same exact combo input for Hadouken in Street Fighter. So you go down and you roll the controller up to the right or left, depending on which way you're facing. And then that was the Hadouken for Ryu and Ken. So same input. So they kind of mixed in this fighter sort of mechanic, like a fighting game mechanic into his blitzes, which is really cool. So I like that. I like obviously Locke has the steal command, and Shadow, when you get him in a bit, has the throw command, so he can throw like. So they. I like how they differentiated each character and kind of gave them their own unique thing, and made them good at it. It's like it's not really useful to use Edgar to attack. You use auto crossbow because you're hitting all the enemies. It's like his specific, unique abilities are what you should be using. Same with Sabin and most characters. So I kind of like, especially for the early game, before you can totally break it wide open and just like give everybody every magic spell and boost their stats and turn them into whatever you want. Like they kind of have individual roles that make them exciting or cool to use. And, get Runic with Celeste later, you absorb the magical attacks of the enemies into the sword. So it's cool. I like that they did that. And then, Edgar and Sabin reunite.
The way the fight looks is fascinating, and this plays on the idea of the abstraction. The abstractions kind of end when you get into the battle area. Yeah. That's when it's like, okay, this is what the monster actually looks like. This is what the terrain actually looks like. Right? They get you into more of a realistic framework with some semi close up, stuff. However, it's really awkward when your characters are still pixel art people in the same thing. So Vargas is like this huge, gigantic, buff god who's like 20 feet tall, and then Sabin is just like this,
tiny,
like he's still his little
chibi
pixel
guy.
dude. So they didn't create those awesome, beefed up sprites for the main characters.
Right.
This would be kind of like you explained earlier in Final Fantasy VII, where in the battle screen they decided to use a higher poly characters. Whereas in a game like this, they kept the normal pixel art characters, but then they had these higher resolution enemies, right? But it's hilarious when Vargas for whatever reason, Sabin stayed his pixel form, but then Vargas got to become a genie,
Yeah.
It's very funny.
Good stuff. So here's another area where the original translation is a little weird. The bear line, right?
That's not in the Japanese.
Yeah. So, It'd be interesting to hear what's in the Japanese here in a second. But
Okay, let me
even in
pull it
the
up.
English, he changed one of Terra's lines in a way to which it didn't make any sense that Sabin refers to himself as a bear later on. So what happens is they talk about what they're going to do, and Edgar says, a means of striking back has presented itself. There will be more or no more playing lapdog to the Empire. I'm through with that act. And then Sabin says in response, do you think, in quotes, a bear like me could be of any help? Now, that is like a total nonsense line in the SNES version, because what Terra had said earlier here, because Edgar says, Sabin, and Sabin says, brother, and they're like, oh my gosh, they're twin brothers, they're reunited. And Terra says, his brother, I thought he was some sort of bodybuilder who escaped the gym in the SNES version. But in this version, he says, his brother, at first I thought you were another one of Vargas's bears. So that's why he refers to himself as a bear.
I'm seeing it.
Seconds later.
I'm seeing it
in
now.
the scene. Okay, so you're seeing it in Japanese.
I am. So the Japanese does talk about a bear earlier on in the previous one. So the word bear instead of bodybuilder.
Yes.
Saying like, oh, I could have sworn you were like a bear or something. A bear? Oh, a bear. Huh, I like it. But then later on, when he says, think a bear like me could help in your fight, the Japanese just said, could my skills help with the cause?
Right.
But what Honeywood did is take the previous reference to bear and change it to bodybuilder, and then move that reference forward about 12 sentences,
Some way that
and
makes
then
no
expect people to get. They should have said bodybuilder again. He should have said, think a bodybuilder like you could help in your fight.
Exactly.
If you're going to use that earlier, then or just don't do it at all.
Don't do it.
Just say what the Japanese says, which is, could my skills help in your fight?
Right. It's really weird in the SNES. It was just like, what are you talking about, bear? Where's this coming from?
I almost think that, like, how Honeywood already did a full translation first before he had to throw it away and then redo a new one.
Yeah.
I almost feel like when he redid his new translation, he was going through everything and he was trying to make sure the references were still there. And he was like, oh, but there's a thing about bears. I'll put it in here instead. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's my best best charitable reading for Honeywood.
Anyway, so they join forces. Sabin comes with you, and it's time to go to the Returner's hideout.
Yep.
Do you know what's hilarious?
What?
I think we're going to have to leave off of the Returner's hideout. I mean, not now, but we'll do the Returner's hideout, and then we'll
leave
there.
off at the river.
Yeah. I thought we would go further. We didn't. Every time. Okay, so you arrive at the Returner's hideout, and they go to see Bannon. Bannon is the
leader of the Returners.
The leader of the Returners. So, Bannon, we brought her with us, says Edgar. And Bannon says, so, this is the girl, the one whom the Esper, or to whom the Esper responded.
Yeah.
Terra says, Esper? And Edgar says, it seems the Empire had complete control over her. And Bannon says, carrier pigeons have kept me informed. I also heard that she wiped out 50 Imperial soldiers in mere minutes.
And this is where Terra starts stepping backwards and like, I can't remember. I think she has to sit down or something, but she's like really not feeling well. Like what? You can almost sense there's a hint of her actually remembering that she did this. Yeah. But like shutting it out.
Denying it.
I do not want to remember that. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do it. It didn't happen, right?
Yep. So she's no, that's not, or I think in the SNS version, like lies or something like that. Right?
Yeah, something like that.
Similar thing. When you don't want to accept something, you denial. And so Edgar's like, for heaven's sake, Bannon, the girl doesn't remember anything. Like, why would you say that? That's like the first thing you say to this person. Like, what are you doing? And he says, I feel like this is pretty harsh, and even more so in this version. Hiding from the truth won't change it. So he's just being very like matter of fact.
Yes, and really
and blunt.
He's trying to lead a group of rebels that doesn't have a huge chance at winning.
Yeah,
and he can't take a ton of chances.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's like, oh, here's this soldier girl who's definitely a soldier for the other empire, but we're pretty sure she was brainwashed, and she has superpowers and stuff, and maybe we could use her to help us. And he's just like, I'm going to verify everything you're saying before I trust and just like put our whole plan into the hands of this girl.
Right.
And I totally understand that.
Yeah.
At the same time, maybe have this conversation where she isn't there.
Where she's not in the room.
Yeah. Because even if it's like, oh, I don't trust her, she might turn on us. It's like, yeah, Also, she's right there. So if she's going to turn on you, she might do it right now. So just like play cool and then have this discussion somewhere else later.
Right.
And then when she's not present, and then maybe you could have her listening in still or something like that.
Sneaking and listening.
But at a point where she's not present, then say, dude, I don't trust her. This is crazy. Why would we risk our whole operation that's already under so much fire and change the whole plan like right now?
Yeah.
I think that maybe would have been better.
If she had wiped out 50 Imperial soldiers in mere minutes, what do you think she's going to do to us? Right. If she's just pretending to be brainwashed, or if she's...
But the idea is that, she's right there. If she's going to kill you, she'd do it.
Right.
She would be doing it right now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't mind at all his suspicion. Right.
Yeah.
This is very realistic. This makes perfect sense. And Locke also, for his own personal reasons that we'll discuss later, also being kind of the only one who's really, really empathetic towards her. Mm-hmm. Right. It all just makes sense. My point is that the character motivations make sense, even if you want to be upset that Bannon's being so blunt.
Sure.
It works, and it works for the story, I think.
Yeah. And I'm actually really interested to see what you read out of this next line, because it's almost like a hint at some kind of mythology of this world.
Pandora's box.
Yeah, Pandora's box thing.
Yeah.
So he says, perhaps you've heard this story before. Once, when people were still pure and innocent, almost like Garden of Eden type of time.
Yeah.
Right?
Pandora's box is very similar to that. Yeah.
There was a box they were told never to open, but someone went and opened it anyway, unleashing all the evils of the world: pride, envy, greed, wrath, gluttony. The only thing that remained in the box was a single ray of hope, or a single ray of light, which was hope.
So this is this is the story of Pandora's box, straight from Greek mythology. Some stories don't include the hope part.
Right.
It's some retellings of the story is she screwed it up. But then other retellings of the story have included that, but there also was hope at the very bottom, right? Mm-hmm. But this is very much Garden of Eden-like as well. Yeah. And of course, maybe this could just be how ancient times worked. But in both instances, it was a woman, who was responsible for either whether it's the fruit or the box or whatever it is. Now we have Terra, and it's like, well, he's just drawing these parallels where maybe he shouldn't, but he, when you don't have enough information, you go on the little information you have, which is, well, she could cause us some severe harm. I really liked that retelling, and I thought it was fascinating that in Final Fantasy, they basically tell the story directly from Greek mythology, referencing this. Like, I don't know. I usually they make up their own. They give their own little twist, their own flavor to it. Yeah. And in this one, they just literally took it straight from Greece and put it right into their game.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And then his follow-up to this, your power is a gift, not a curse. No matter what happens, you must remember that. You are this world's last ray of light and our final hope.
Last hope.
The Last Hope?
Star Wars.
Oh, Star Wars: The Last Hope.
This is, I feel like the way that it's put is something of a Star Wars reference. Like you're the only hope.
There's definitely a lot of Star Wars references.
I have a few other ones too. I have a few other ones. There's tons. They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So anyway, this is the first person. Even though he was all harsh, kind of at first, and scaring her a little bit, right? Being a bit gruff and condescending maybe a little bit about it. He softens up quite a bit at the end there, and he's the first person to reference her power as not being a curse but a gift, something good, right? And likening her to the ray of hope in the box, not the evils that escaped from the box.
I love that too, because you've got Terra, right, who killed 50 soldiers. Now she doesn't remember this fully, right? She doesn't know exactly what her past holds, but you can look at her and say, your power is horrific.
Yep.
And it can destroy the world. But it could also save the world. Yep. Right? And it all depends on how it's used, and that's entirely up to you. And so given that her power has killed 50 soldiers like all in one go, and they were like Magitech soldiers, right? So it was like it was a big deal that she was able to do that. That's all the bad coming out of Pandora's box.
Right.
But then he's saying, hey, just reach all the way down and grab the good, right? Now, he's got to be very trusting of her in order to do that. But it sounds like, and especially as the Gestalian Empire closes in on their little hideout here, he doesn't have a ton of options, right? And I get the suspicion, but at the same time, if there is hope to be had, grab and hold on to it because their hope is fading fast for the returners.
Right. So Bannon then leaves. He's grown weary with the hour. Allow me to rest for a while. You kind of so you talk to the characters. I think Tara goes to rest for a bit, and she wakes up and he's there. And he says, "The Empire stole something important from me, and I've hated it ever since. If no one stands up to the Empire, more people will be left like me. That's why I joined the Returners." And she says, "But there's no one important in my life. I have no family and no friends." And I like his response to that. That's not true. Like, how do you even know that, first of all? You don't remember anything.
Yeah.
And he says, "Besides, I'm sure there are people out there who feel you're important to them, but you just don't remember them, right? Like,
Sure.
you feel alone, but like that's not necessarily true. That's not the case. Those people are counting on you too." So I really liked that. He sort of is acting as this character for her. That's like I said earlier, when she's like kind of at her moments of being like, I don't know what to do, or being really conflicted, he's kind of there and can say the right thing, unlike, say, Edgar or somebody else.
Yeah.
So you can go talk to Sabin and Edgar. This is a little different. This is another translation issue, I feel like. In this version, what Sabin says is, "I don't know what to tell you, but I do know that I trust my brother completely. He always thought of my needs before his own ever since we were little. I think you should trust him too, but don't tell him I said that. He'll turn red like a tomato." Whereas in the other version, he says, "Don't you dare tell him I said that," almost in like I don't want my brother to think I like him too much kind of way.
Right.
It totally changed the context of it. Like, don't tell him I said that because I can't let my brother know I love him. But here it's like he's almost thinking more of his embarrassment, and he's like, he always cared for me. It softens it a lot.
Well, it shows that from his perspective, he's like, he has always really cared for me, and also I care for him. Instead of, and don't tell him because I'm the angsty little brother. Yeah, it's like, no, I also don't want him to be embarrassed or whatever. So it's like a reciprocal mutual relationship.
Right, totally changes how that reads.
That's
I like it way better in this version.
I missed that.
And then if you talk to Edgar, he says, "It's not easy asking so much of you, and if we force our ideas on you, we're no different from the Empire. So we want you to decide for yourself." And this is where you can then go talk to Bannon. He's kind of outside the front of the hideout. And you can tell him no or yes. And you have to say no 3 times to really say no. So he basically says, "Have you made your decision? Will you become our last ray of hope?" And if you say no, he'll say, "I see." But then
I did that, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to go talk to him again, and he'll ask it again. Yeah. "Will you join us?" And then if you say no, "I thought as much." And then the 3rd time, you have to go out there. So there's no convincing you. And she says, "Hope, how could anyone put their hope in me?" for saying no.
In the Japanese, she says, "Hope, I can't be something like that."
Yeah,
is what she said.
Right. And if that's the case, it will skip the scene where they have their little strategy meeting, and it goes straight to the soldier returning there wounded and saying, "The Empire's almost on us, and we got to get out of here like right now." And everyone sort of like, makes plans to leave. But if you say yes at any point here, then they'll have a whole scene where they sit down and discuss what their next move is, which I like because it sets up your next goal or motivation as the player. Like, where are you going next?
Yeah.
Right? We got to go back to Narsh and see if we can get Tara to talk to this Esper. And see if we can figure out how to make Magitech weapons of our own or not, or see if there's anything we can glean from this. Right. So you'll miss that whole scene if you just say no, no, no. However, I do like saying no. It feels more natural because she just doesn't know.
At least say no once.
Yeah. She just doesn't know if she should do that or not.
Right.
It makes
it's a lot of pressure.
More emotional, logical sense to me that she would refuse that call.
Yeah.
In terms of the story arc and structure and whatnot. But there is a lot of good stuff you miss if you don't do it. Also, there's 2 different items you get. If you say yes to him, he gives you an accessory and a relic called the Gauntlet, which allows you to wield a single weapon in 2 hands.
With 2 hands,
so it's more powerful. But if you say no to him, then you'll get the Genji glove, which allows you to dual wield weapons, so 2 weapons, which is a better item. It's a better relic.
Dual wielding is sweet.
But you can get the Genji glove by saying no one time, going and talking to the NPC who gives you the Genji glove. Then you can go back and say yes and still see this scene. So you can still get the Genji glove if you want and see what happens if you say yes. So it's possible to kind of have your cake and eat too. Cool. So let's go through this. This will be where we leave off for today. Bannon comes in. We all know that the Gestalian Empire is using its Magitech power to wage war. The question is, where did they get that power? So this is going back to what I was referencing earlier with the 3 Magitech armors being able to do all the damage they did. I'm actually curious if they haven't yet unleashed Magitech on the world, except for in the south where they're taking out all these people. But maybe the people in the north are just now learning that this Magitech even exists.
Well, because of something that happens in Doma later on with Cyan, I would probably agree with that.
Yeah. I think the Empire is just now unleashing these Magitech armor, these machines infused with magic for the first time. And these people in the northern parts of the world are just learning about this. And that's what they're discussing here. So I think that's why Narsh was taken by such surprise there, because they probably had no clue what those machines were or how to respond to a threat like that.
That would make sense.
Which would make sense why just 3 people could go do all the damage they did to the soldiers in Narsh. I think I just got a message from Dude McGuy. It must be really important. There's a dialogue box from Bannon that was cut in the SNES version due to a bug. It kind of changes Bannon's character a bit because it seems like he's considering using Magitech armor again. Oh, okay. We'll get into this because I'm going to be reading the advanced version because you're right. This is another mistake by Woolsey.
Oh, great.
So let me just read through, and then I'll bring up what you're talking about. We all know that the Gestalian Empire is using Magitech power to wage war. The question is, where did they get that power? Edgar says, I had Locke dig around for information. It seems the Empire has been gathering scholars from around the world to study espers. And Locke says, Narsh's esper was also the reason for the Imperial assault there. Tara says, are you saying there's some kind of connection between espers and Magitech? And Bannon says, espers and Magitech, only one possible link comes to mind. And Edgar says, you don't mean, and they let this linger, yes, the War of the Magi. Right?
Of course.
So
nice.
Locke says, my grandmother used to tell me bedtime stories about magical machines. Were those stories really true? And Edgar says, you're telling me that we're on the verge of a second War of the Magi? Bannon says, it's only a guess. The war took place 1,000 years ago, and every historian has a different theory. But one theory says that energy drained from espers was used to power machines, and that ordinary humans were also infused with that same energy. So this is the first time where this idea of espers being drained of their magic and that magic being infused into machines and people is a concept that they're introducing here, and that was part of the reason for the tragedy of the war 1,000 years ago. So Tara says, so that's what Magitech power is. And Edgar says, if we're going to fight Magitech enemies, we need Magitech weapons of our own. This is what Dude McGuy's bringing up. They added this line back in here where Bannon says, no, that would bring about another War of the Magi. So he's against the use of Magitech weapons.
Okay.
In the original SNES, it can be read or come across like he's on board with the idea when he's really not at all.
Very interesting.
So Edgar's like, well, then what do you propose? And Bannon says, I was wondering if we might not be able to have a chat with an esper. And Edgar's, with an esper? And Bannon says, it's risky, but that esper reacted to Terra before. If we could get it to react to her again, we just might be able to wake it up. And then Edgar says, do you really think that would work? He says, I can't say for sure, but I believe it's our best shot. Of course, we can't do anything without Terra's help. So again, are you willing to do this?
And I love this. They're really emphasizing that they are giving her a choice.
Yes.
They are not forcing her to do anything. If she says no, they're going to do a different plan. Like the ends would not justify the means. Even if they really believe in this plan, they aren't going to force her to do it.
Yep.
They will all perish rather than force her to do something she doesn't want to do.
Right.
And that's a stark contrast to the Gestalian Empire.
Yep. So she says, I'll do it. She agrees. Again, this would only come on the back of having actually agreed to ban him earlier. So,
Yeah.
And then at this point, basically, what was that noise? And then a soldier comes in. The Empire's on our tails. They know where we're at. They're coming right now.
And they took South Figaro.
Yep.
And yeah.
So Edgar sends Locke back to South Figaro to mess with them, use his special skills of infiltration to slow them down.
One of the best parts of the game. I can't wait to talk about it next week. I love it. Next week. It's so good.
And so this is where the scenario splits into 3. So we have Bannon, Terra, Edgar, and Sabin, who kind of take off on a raft down the river, while Locke goes to try to slow down the Empire in South Figaro.
I call this the breaking of the Fellowship.
The breaking of the Fellowship.
Yes. The Fellowship is broken, but not if they hold true to each other. So, anyways, on the raft, Sabin, this scene is so absolutely funny.
Yep.
So you fight this like tentacle monster octopus.
Ultros.
Yes.
Dude, I freaking love
and
Ultros.
You kill Ultros. Well, you don't kill him. The question is he dead? And it's like, I don't know. I don't think so. And Sabin is just like, I'm going to give him a blitz. You just wait. And everyone's like, dude, don't do this. Like, let's just go. And he's like, nah, man. And he jumps into the water. And he's going to do some underwater blitz. I don't know what he's going to do. Anyways, he gets jacked. It doesn't work out. But Bannon is hilarious because Terra and who was it? Edgar?
Yeah.
Are like really concerned about him. They're like, oh my gosh, is he going to die? And Bannon's like, he'll be fine. He does this all the time. He's fine. He'll come plopping down onto the raft any minute now.
Well, and I love how like they show like a sprite of Sabin with his eyes closed, like he's unconscious, like floating down the river. There's like Sabin!
And Bannon is so funny. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's like, good. He's all good.
There's a way that this scene could have been just this very tragic thing. But the way they portrayed it, the way they went about it is so absolutely hilarious. It is so funny.
Really funny.
And then from that point, the raft splits and goes left, and then Sabin goes right, and you're not able to see him again. So the Fellowship is broken at this point.
Yep.
They all leave. They're going to try to regroup at some other point. But Sabin is going to go to who knows where.
Yep.
Edgar, Terra, and Bannon are headed to Narsh.
Yep.
And then Locke is going to South Figaro.
And then after he finishes his work there, he'll rejoin with them in Narsh as well.
The idea is that they're all going to meet up at Narsh so Terra can get into those caves.
Yep. Get into the caves, try to talk to the Esper, see what they can learn. So that's kind of the next major goal for our characters. But Sabin's going to take a long route because he's going to get washed really far away. So we will get into those scenarios next time, and I am actually going to right now look up to a new place for us to play to because we did not get to where I thought we were going to get to.
While you're doing that, maybe just like through the Phantom Train, I don't know. Actually, no, because we should be able to get to the 3 scenarios pretty quickly.
I think we should, because
two
of them are really short.
Yeah, let's go a little more. Dude McGuy mentioned, wants to make clear that the bug that made it so that Bannon's line was removed is just not Ted Woolsey's fault. So don't blame him. It wasn't his fault that Bannon.
It was a bug, not he didn't remove it.
It wasn't removed by him on purpose. It was for some weird reason they weren't able to make it work. That whole line had to be deleted because it messed with some stuff later on.
Yeah. For next time, play up through the iconic opera scene. That's where our target is going to be to get through for next time. There's no guarantees we will do it.
I think we can do it.
But we'll try. So that's where to play up to for next time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As always, we appreciate you watching, and we hope you're enjoying this so far. We'll see you next week. Peace out.